Hello and welcome to Builders, the podcast where we dive deep into the minds of those shaping the future of tech. I'm Lee Haynes, and today I'm joined by Cecilia Borg, founder of Be Afraid, Do It Anyway, and currently Interim VP Tech Ops at Viaplay Group. Cecilia has carved out a niche as a high-impact interim executive, stepping into complex engineering organizations to help untangle challenges, reset direction, and scale sustainable practices. From hiring and hybrid culture to leadership development and organizational rewiring, Cecilia brings both strategic vision and executional grit. Cecilia, it's a pleasure to have you join us today. Welcome to the podcast. How's it going?
No, excellent. Thank you so much, Lee, for having me.
And thanks for joining. Let's dive in, shall we? To kick things off, can you tell us a bit about your career journey and what ultimately inspired you to start Be Afraid, Do It Anyway?
So I've got a master in science, computer science degree, and I've always been intrigued by programming. So in the mid-90s, I actually didn't know that programming was a real profession, but I was intrigued by, Nintendo games and everything, and mathematics. So that proved to be the right decision. And then also I'm a scout and scout leader working together in small teams. And as kind of in my professional career and in tech, I think more and more developers have become less of an isolated programmer and more into developer teams and working together towards a common goal, much of what I did in the Scout movement. So working as a developer for a couple of years and working as engineering manager and product manager at Oracle, which is a big organization, I found myself applying the same values as I did when leading both scout leaders and scouts in the woods, finding a common goal. And then kind of over my career, I've been working at corporations like Oracle, but I started out in a startup that quickly scaled up. I've been acquired a couple of times, merging. I've been working at scale-ups in Stockholm, like King and Spotify and Kry, Epidemic Sound. And I see the same challenges. How do we scale organizations? How do we work together? How do we thrive? How do we make people have fun and be innovative? So that's why I founded Be Afraid and Do It Anyway. So I work as a change leader, transformation leadership, and going into organizations to help them do transformations in the organization.
Fantastic. And what does your day-to-day look like as an interim tech leader? It must change so much depending on the environment, right?
Yeah. So I've been at a variety of different companies, changing businesses from esport and gaming and legal licensing and music and so many things. But being in a development organization, it holds the same things. We need to understand where the business is going and the challenges and the gaps and the opportunities, and helping engineers to see that. So in my role, I come in as operational, and I'm responsible to deliver value from the organization. At the same time, I'm responsible to create change and create transformation in the organization. So working with the executives or the board, they ask me to see why, how can we be more innovative? How can we have employees being more happy at work and aligned and motivated, or having better quality, or getting better quality in the product? And many companies have been growing and scaling up, and all the pains and challenges coming with that. In the latest years, organization has been faced with cost cuts and redundancy. And how do you take care of an organization and finding fun and energy and a purpose in that? So a lot to... So in my day-to-day work, I come into work, I deal with my colleagues and trying to see what are the day-to-day tasks and doing them, but also looking ahead and seeing the bigger picture. So I'm working a lot with creating shared understanding across the organization, not only in your team, but also understanding what your neighboring team does and what all other teams, and how it ladders up to the same purpose, to make us feel committed to the same target and collaborate.
And so this role obviously involves a lot of change, transformation, as you've put it. How do you approach balancing stability, which is required obviously in lots of areas of the organization, but how do you balance the stability and change in the different environments where you're brought into to make things move?
Yeah. So I think what drives developers into burnout is feeling kind of the loss of control a lot. When they don't know if they're going to make a mistake or kind of what will happen and so on. So I try to bring stability and expectations and setting clear expectations with developers, trying to make them see, what should we deliver on? Are we there? What is the gap? How can we close it? And if I'm proposing a change, I try to set it against some business purpose. I say that it's an experiment. I say, I think we need to reach this change or this result, this effect. I think this is a way that could be possible. And now we're going to try it out. How long and when are we going to evaluate it? So I think that is my way of making them see the structure of change management, making them feel in control of the change, because we will try a lot of different changes before we find the right one.
Yeah.
So I usually say that change is the only constant, and making them feel at ease or kind of being friends with change.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I think for many organizations, it's kind of, it's a constant, and it's making people feel comfortable, kind of familiar with the fact that, there's always going to be change, essentially. But I was reading as well before how interim leaders are increasingly in demand. That more and more companies essentially are kind of turning to interim executives and leaders for these complex, time sensitive change efforts, where the traditional hiring might just doesn't cut it, essentially. This is obviously good news for a company like yours, right? With Be Afraid, Do It Anyway. Have you felt this growth in demand?
Well, I started this company 4.5 years back, and I haven't had problems in finding assignments in this. So I think for senior leaders and stepping in, because there are so much change, and I think what you alluded to before, kind of getting people who have seen it all before, finding stability and getting that into companies, I think it's needed. And when in this interim roles and covering for paternal leaves, or when you kind of looking for new leaders, or also you need to reshape your whole organization because you're shrunk or you are merged with some other company and so on. So you need a couple of months to think about the next step. And I think that's why my role is needed.
Yeah. And in these roles, I mean, it's not just one role. These are different roles, right? I mean, interim CTO, VP of engineering, VP tech ops, or whatever it might be. These must require quite different skill sets and obviously different practices depending on the organization that you're going into. How do you wear or don so many different hats? How do you balance that?
So when I started my career, I did my master's thesis at the research institute. And I quickly realized that I'm no researcher. I don't want to kind of dive into some niche topic for a couple of years. So I really enjoy the fast-paced and learning a lot about different things. So my first job was in a role that many people would call site reliability engineering right now, or release engineering or so on. So we were working as fourth tier support within a product organization, dealing with finding different problems in the product, and learning a lot about technology, but then also building all the tools to be able to debug and to find and do the release. So, and I thrived in that environment. I became the manager after a couple of years for that team, and I stayed in that team for 10 years. So as a developer for 5 years and a manager for 5 years, working, and we developed, my first summer, we did a distributed build and test system because there weren't any. And this was 20 years ago. It was way before DevOps was a commodity. We didn't have Jenkins or anything back then, but we realized that for it to scale, we needed to automate. So I quickly wore several hats. As an engineer, as a manager, we were release managing, we were DevOps engineering, we were debuggers, we were support, we were developers, we were everything. And when we merged with another company where they hadn't had that kind of mentality to automate and the DevOps mentality, they had the same product and they had kind of siloed organization and they were stuck in sync meetings. So they couldn't get out. And I realized how lean we were and how agile we were. And agile wasn't in the vocabularies either back then. So then I found the DevOps movement. It was just forming back then. And then I realized what we had done was kind of across everything. It was across leadership, values, technology around tooling. It was us as self-organizing teams. We could do whatever, as long as we got the work done, we can change our ways. So in that regard, I started following these movements with agile methodologies and DevOps and everything. And I tried on and made sure that I'd stayed horizontal and vertical, talking to leadership, understanding the business. And I've been working as a CEO for a company as well, for 3 years. I'm working as a CTO. I've been working in product. I've been working in many of these, and I see that it's not one of these. So I think I'm really T-shaped. And I think that is where the future is also going. If you want to, you need to build your organization of people who want to learn other traits. Because there are many hats for us to succeed.
And companies can move much faster in those cases as well. And to talk a little bit more about leadership, you've obviously led teams across a range of different environments. Has there been a consistent, or what's consistent in your approach to leadership across those different environments or different phases?
So as I said, I come from the Scout movement, and we're a value-based movement. So I quickly learned to put words to my values and to my leadership, and that has helped me. And that has also helped me being explicit towards the people reporting into me. So I lead by 3 values. It's trust and respect. I trust the people, and I expect everyone to trust each other and put trust and respect. Don't write in capital letters to anyone, and don't power CC the CTO into email. Kind of go and talk to people in a respectful way and respect their role. Everyone has a role to take, making that explicit. And the second value is collaboration, to always collaborate. And I create strong teams, but are also inclusive and also always prepared. It's not us and them. It's us and the rest of the organization, us and the rest of the company, us and our partners and our clients and society. So being inclusive, even though you find focus in your everyday team. So collaboration and making sure that there's no them in organizations. And the third leadership value is transparency, to make sure that I'm open about everything, that I can say no to things. If I don't have time, I can say, I actually can't prioritize this now because I have these other 3 priorities, and showing people what they are so they can, I am open to be challenged. And transparency in system overviews and architectures, and showing people maps of everything, and showing like visual facilitation. I always introduce Miro if it's not, those digital whiteboards, and showing people strategies and always pointing back at why we're here and trying to visualize things. So those values are consistent across kind of leadership, my leadership style across everywhere.
And when you enter a new organization, are there early signals or patterns that you look for that tell you where to focus first?
Yeah. So I evaluate organizations by 3 dimensions. First, I check trust in the organization. Do people greet each other at the coffee machine? Do people have cameras on in their meetings? Do people kind of look at me with a smile on their face and open? And what about the temperature and meeting climates? Are people open, or are people rolling their eyes at each other? And that has happened. So trust is the first dimension, and just to see. And also, are people talking about management in a certain way and not trusting them and saying that, how do people talk about management? So trust first, or one of them anyway. And the second one is how, the methods, the ways of working. How are meetings concluded? Are we going over the same thing in meeting after meeting after meeting? Do we follow a structure, an agenda? Do we have processes in the organization that people know where to follow? And are we proactive? Do we look at the timeline? Do we have do people know how we work, and is it efficient? And then the third thing, and maybe I start there sometimes, it's purpose, or why. Do we know? And when talking to leaders and CEOs and boards, I call it the Monday test. I ask the CEO, could you stand in front of your building, in front of your company on a Monday morning, greet everyone coming into the office, and ask them, what are the 3 main challenges for your company? So can everyone state that with their own words? Is it to have positive EBITDA? Is it to reach a competitor and go across that? Is it to take over a market or enter a new market? So what is that? That is not only vision, but a real concrete target. And if they can do that, how does the work that they will do today ladder up into one of those 3 targets? And I believe that no one at the company can hit directly the target. Very few people have direct targeted. Most people are 3 degrees away from it, but you should be able to very quickly step ladder up into that target. And if you can do that and also understand how other people ladder up to that, then we have a real innovative organization. We have people coming happy to work, feeling pride, and they know what to do, and they know the effect of what they're doing. They know when to say if they're blocked and ask for help. They also know when to help other people and other teams, other team members, and other teams in other departments. And reorganizations become a really easy thing because it's evident to everyone where we need to add more people to it.
Really, really well put. But when you're brought in to lead this different transformations, I can only imagine that this initial period, whether that's 90 days, a few months, or whatever it might be, it must be absolutely critical. How do you, during this time, how do you prioritize what matters most? What's your approach to communicating clearly without perhaps overwhelming already stretched teams in some cases?
Yeah. So we need to find change that matters, or motivation of some kind where people see that it really makes a difference. And for example, organizations with too much money, it's very hard to establish change there because why should you? But now in the recent turn of events, there aren't enough money in many companies, and investors have restricted their inflow of money and so on. So now people are motivated to do some change, but people are so tired of change. And a bit of trust is missing, and there have been a lot of pivoting and so on. And reductions in force, that's never a democratic solution either. So people feel a bit suspicious to any change. So I need to do my homework and make sure that I can create shared understanding across why we're here and really find the business narrative of that organization. And that's often missing. Often we have some purpose or some target, but it's a bit blurry how we ladder up into that. Or maybe the leadership sees a problem, but it's not clear to the teams their effect and their impact. So I need to find something that really matters to the teams. I need to show them how urgent it is. And if I don't find that immediately, I start by asking the teams and going around and doing tech debt workshops and asking them what's holding us back, and then mapping out and seeing, is this really a problem for the whole organization? And if it is, then we know that the people want to solve it, the business needs it to be solved, and you can start there. But we need to find some place for, we need to find a problem that wants to be solved by the organization.
And to use like a real world example like Viaplay, where you're currently working in this kind of transformation heavy role, it's been undergoing fairly significant restructuring, refocusing across different regions. What have you learned from stepping into an organization like Viaplay during high stakes transition?
So Viaplay is a huge organization, and big organizations need shared understanding and simplified narratives. So that's what I'm trying to work with, and then both doing the high level perspectives and being there on town hall meetings and iterating. What is the holistic picture? What are we here? Are we there yet? What is the gap? But then quickly finding a way to scale, because I can't scale. I'm only one person. So finding my ways into interest groups like guilds and observability guilds, finding change ambassadors, working through staff engineers and principals, and seeing their maturity and what kind of change agents they can be, and putting the tools in their hands and solving the problems that they also want to choose and helping them find a structure to do that. Because then we can plant seeds, and then we can scale up and we can help them succeed. Because people that are staff engineers in big organizations are also often struggling themselves in getting, and they're also, I'm an outsider. I'm stepping in as a contractor. I have that card where I can say, let's try this because I'm hired to do that.
Yeah.
It's harder for change agents that are employed in the organization when doing change, because they have the legacy of relationships and politics and everything else. So I can be a catalyst for them and find the change agent and set them a direction, give them some momentum. So when stepping into Viaplay, that's organizations like Viaplay as well. That's what I do. Finding change agents and showing them the bigger picture and the problem that wants to be solved.
And not specifically about Viaplay here, but just generally, have you met a lot of kind of resistance when you are, like you say, you come in as like an outsider, right? So is there this kind of initial resistance that's often there among those that you're kind of trying to work with and trying to execute change with?
Yes, that can definitely happen.
And how do you deal with that in that case? Are there any kind of best practices that you follow or strategies that you have in place to deal with that?
Yeah. So in some of the organizations I've stepped into, there has been a lack of trust, and people have been worn out, a change fatigue, and kind of people almost giving up. And then I push energy into these organizations, into the people. Sometimes some of the people just need to move away, to get some fresh air somewhere else, to be replanted, and kind of they're not feeling well, and they kind of just how much they would have hoped and how much work they put in, kind of they need to change for themselves and for everyone. But I always give it a try, and I push energy into them, and I ask them, I do development plans with them, kind of where are you going and what do you want to do and what have you done and what is the biggest problem, and I help them trying to solve it. And often they've given up and saying, well, it's no use and I've tried this. And then I can see if there are any early wins and to get some kind of that ignite going, to catch some fire in that. And then trying to get some early wins so that they can see that change is possible.
Yeah.
Finding something that makes effect, but isn't kind of the most stuck thing in the organization.
No, it makes sense. And to go on to talk about a little bit about developer hiring or engineer hiring and ways of working. What challenges have you seen in the past, or are you seeing right now when it comes to hiring great engineers, especially in more hybrid or remote setups, for example, which are far more common nowadays?
Yeah. So when it comes to change management and the kind of change organizations going through right now, I think hybrid teams have a more challenging path ahead because so many things can happen when you turn that camera off. You're leaving engineers and team members alone in their home when you communicated change. It could be a small change or a little change or every day. And you don't know. So it takes a lot from the whole team and from the manager and everything. So when it comes to hiring developers, I look for people who understands that they need to be an explicit team player, and they need to be transparent about their feelings, their contributions. They need to be engaged with their team members. They need to understand to be visible and to act visibly. And that is to greet each other on Slack each morning and send cat gifs and play games with each other. It's around being transparent of what you're trying to achieve and ask for help and offer help and being that team player 10 times more than you have to be when you're coming into the office and you quickly see if someone is kind of frowning or at a problem at hand or having a bug and so on. No one sees that. So you need to dare to step up and to be explicit in Slacks. And I also think it comes down to not being that isolated programmer. It's more to being that creative developer as well, to talk about to understand the business, to be part of the business narrative for the whole company, and to say that should we be doing this at all? Shouldn't we be kind of throwing this away and trying an AI solution or something else? Daring to share daring to try to understand the purpose and the business value you're going to deliver, and so on. And and if you're going to be a successful hybrid developer, then you need to have more of that trait when I'm looking for developers.
Yeah. I can only agree. I think even what we're talking about here is kind of behavioral characteristics, right? That it's going far beyond the kind of technical ability. So if you were to kind of like weigh up both sides of the equation here, is there one that you prioritize over the other, like technical ability over these soft aspects or behavioral characteristics, or do you think both are kind of equally important in this day and age?
The behavioral aspects is important across both junior developers and senior developers. You need to have these traits in modern development teams, both hybrid and on-site. And then when it comes to technical aspects, you can clearly see the difference between kind of technical ability with a senior and a junior. Kind of the ability to code and kind of train on frameworks and designing solutions and seeing if this is maintainable and creating great APIs and everything. So I'm prepared. So, and I think the teams need to have a mix of juniors and seniors. But I'm prepared. Kind of, your question alludes to kind of behavior and technical. I think for junior developers, I appreciate behavioral traits kind of above technical, because if you have the right behavioral traits, if you're kind of good enough compared to a junior developer who doesn't have the behavioral traits I'm looking for, but are a skilled, kind of really skilled tech, then I would go for the kind of the one with the better behavioral skills and kind of team player.
And I think all of this is so important because in like the ways of working, the kind of hybrid or remote setup, because I think there are a lot of kind of articles or surveys out there that show how so many developers nowadays say that they'd turn down an offer from a company that doesn't offer these kind of flexible or remote options, right? Hence, like in recent times, it's become so important for people when they're looking for new work. What's your approach to like building hybrid teams that could like feel connected, aligned, productive, aligned with the greater kind of business objective as well? This is kind of much more challenging in hybrid or remote setups, right? Do you have a kind of a good strategy as to kind of how you can build this connection?
So your question was kind of two parts. One part about developers turning down on-site or kind of work.
Yeah, or kind of that expectation of the flexibility of remote.
And then about kind of building that product. So being on-site, I think it's more easy for the company to pivot a couple of times in getting everyone on board if people are on site, and you can talk to people, you can see their reactions, you can turn them around and so on. And in that, I think asking developers to be on site for that time, challenging time of the company when they're constantly pivoting and trying to find kind of the way to make revenue and to get those black numbers and so on. It might be that they have to ask that from developers. Be on site, come here, because we need to optimize for the survival of the company, for innovation, because we don't know. It's too much, and we don't know when to pivot. We can pivot several times, and we need you to be here. We need you to be flexible and to quickly get to know everyone else, because maybe you can say, because the solution will be in everyone. But it's not every company that can have that. And then you have the hybrid solution to do that. But then you need to state that and be very clear that you need to step up as a hybrid. And that is, you need to, and that a lot of things falls into the leader, I think, the engineering manager, to be able to relay the business purpose and the business narrative to everyone, and to prepare people for change and to teach them transformation and change management and everything. And then it comes down to building teams and being explicit and doing the games and the workshops and visibility and engaging. And also, how do you get to know other people in other teams and working in guilds and interest groups and clubs and bookshops? How do you tie those relationships with other teams? Because we're not in a world where you have static teams doing a single task and doing that as fast as possible. we need to stay flexible as an organization where team constellations can change. Yeah. And it's very few. Some of the teams are very stable, maybe the IT or operations center or things, but all of the other teams should be designed to have small or large changes happening to them every quarter, I would say. New people coming in, ownership of new services, deprecation of old services, kind of be prepared to change. And if you are as a hybrid team member, I think you can thrive. I think you can learn a lot. You have the opportunities to change teams from your own desk at home and so on. But it also requires you to be flexible and for your manager to actually relay and having that. And if you change manager, having the company design the career ladders and development, personal development, so that those processes are designed with a constant change of managers as well, that you don't break you have consistency. And I think that if you do that, then you can also have great retention.
Yeah. And you're talking there a little bit about kind of, expectations of engineering managers. What do you think are the core responsibilities of modern engineering managers today?
So I've met a lot of engineering managers, and I've coached a lot of directors and I've had many engineering managers report to me directly as well. And engineering managers, I think, is one of the most complex and toughest roles and important roles of modern organizations. And I've seen a lot of burnout in them, because it's not hierarchical organization where your manager has all the answers and tells you what to do and can see and measure what you do. It's a lot up to you, and it's opaque. You can't see, and the CTO or the CEO might have unreasonable expectations of you. And with engineering managers, I think I try to clarify my expectations of them, and I think that's most important. And I have I prioritized them, their responsibilities areas in 3. So first of all, and they are prioritized. The most prioritized thing is team health and individual health. And if your engineer has some mental health issues or burnout, if your team is dysfunctional and are having conflicts, you need to fix that. And it's your role as an engineer manager to make sure that happens. Doing retros, one-on-ones, and ensuring team health. So that's the most, but often that's green. So moving on to the second one, and this is also pretty hard. It's sustainable, predictable delivery pace. Sustainable because agile methodologies or practices are kind of not talking about the principles, often talk about sprints and kind of working fast. And if you plan kind of to deliver 100% all the time, it's not sustainable. You need to be prepared to run a marathon. It's not sprints. You can't sprint your way through a marathon. And predictable because you have all these stakeholders. So you need to find out the velocity of your team, not to be compared to other teams, but what is so that you can signal to your stakeholders and being true and transparent to your stakeholders about your team. And helping the team chop up their work so you don't serve things in big bang releases.
Yeah.
So that's the second one. And then the third one is increased capacity. As an engineering manager, you are responsible to constantly increase the capacity of your team. And I think the first thing there is retention. Ensure that people thrive in your team, because that's the most cheap way to increase capacity, because your people gets better and better.
Yeah, exactly.
And then the second kind of part of the increased capacity is tech strategies and removing tech debt and sending people to trainings and classes and working together to increase and kind of looking ahead and learning AI and Copilot and everything. And the third thing within increased capacity is recruitment and employer branding, also spending time there. But as I said, 1, 2, 3, and they're prioritized. You can't spend time on employer branding if you don't know your team health and if you haven't got the retros and so on. Team health is the number one. You need to attend that first.
Really well put. And for these like engineering managers, also even for senior leaders who are coaching new managers, what kind of support or coaching and feedback makes the biggest difference in your view?
So getting to a structure like the one that I've used, that I spoke to set clear expectations of the engineering managers and to build trust with them so that they say when things feel overwhelming and say that things will feel overwhelming and talk to me about it and be that coach and be very clear on what expectations can kind of what can they do or what can't they do. So like team health, they need to do that. And if team health is on green, they need to deliver. They need to stay clear on their to their stakeholders. So clear expectations and talking to them about what's tough and what support they need, and really having that trustful, respectful relationship, and not being kind of a buddy or a friend, kind of staying friendly and kind of being a friend, but also kind of tough, support and push and do all that, but in a respectful way. You can set clear expectations of this and support them to reach it.
And for any developers considering a move into management, let's say that's kind of a natural transition. What should they really think about before making that leap, do you think?
When I was at Acast, a podcasting company, their salary ladder was for senior engineers to have the same salary as engineering managers. It was very easy to move to try it out for some time. And I think that's important to do, or kind of that's one positive or key successful concept anyway, to say that you can try it out. But for senior engineers, I paint them a picture of 3 career choices. And I think it's very good if you can try out all 3 and see where you thrive. So I think you can be a senior engineer all your life. There are so many things with technical and kind of within your team that you can do where you can thrive and really make an impact for a company. And I consider senior engineering kind of having a limited blast radius for your team and maybe for some other team. If you want to make a difference towards have a bigger blast radius and to make a bigger difference and impact, you can consider engineering manager and also staff engineer or principal engineer or architect, whatever kind of the title is at that company. And my expectations of the role of staff engineer is that you lead initiatives, you see what are the possibilities and opportunities and current challenges that is holding you back technical wise, and helping other teams beyond that and helping them towards that. So leading without having the people management responsibility. But it's, just trying to lead other developers, it's really tough. You can't just say what you've concluded on a town hall and everything is done. You need to get there, get into all the teams and talk to them. It's tough. So as a CTO leading staff engineers, I need to slowly ease them into how do you facilitate change, technical change, and help them be explicit around that. And developers have often not exercised that. And then I think the third career path for a senior engineer is to go into engineering management and then be prepared to do some process work and some kind of what's it like being a leader and also not being everyone's friend. I think that was the biggest challenge for me when I was kind of 5 years into my engineering role and was asked to lead the same team. I was like, these are my friends. If I become their managers, I can't be out there drinking beers with them in the same thing. Things won't be the same. And be prepared to take that and, deal with alcoholism, low performers, salary increases, disappointment, kind of all of that, but also seeing that you can make a difference. You can enable these people. You can remove obstacles. You can make them thrive. You can paint out the direction. And you can make all the difference. But it's not always a grateful role. So I think you need to find your way, kind of your own identity as a leader. And that can take a couple of years, I think.
I think they're all really, really interesting points that you make. And it leads me to one question. And that is, like, if there's one common mistake that you see engineering leaders make when managing people, and if so, how can they avoid it?
Yeah, not being clear, not daring to set expectations. And I think that has to do with kind of not wanting to be friends rather than leaders and so on.
Yeah.
But if you extrapolate that thought, and if you see kind of what will happen if I don't make this explicit, you quickly see that, well, the consequences are bad, worse. Yeah. So be clear on the expectations and practice your crispness and clarity in your messaging. And put that kind of, what does success look like? What would make me disappointed? What would make other leaders disappointed? And relay that narrative to the team. And if you can't relay that, people will feel stressed, and people won't know when they're there or what's good enough and what's expected of them. So, and that would make them insecure. It could lead to burnout. It can make them feel, yes, everything is fine, and they don't even know where to start. So I think that's the number one tip, I would say, and kind of where I've seen engineering managers fail, and also not being hands-on or daring to step in, because being an engineering manager, there is a bit of manager contempt in the culture of developers. Not everywhere, but it's easy to point at everyone's had a bad manager. Everyone's had a bad developer colleague as well. But managers, they're so easy to point at. Yeah. So, and then wanting to be that friendly, well, I'm not going to be that person, but then what is your role? Find your identity as a leader.
Yeah. Yeah. And looking ahead then, before I start to wrap up, is there something that you're excited about in tech, team building, leadership that you think more people should be paying attention to right now?
Well, the obvious thing right now is AI. Mm-hmm. And especially as leaders, I think we can use AI to help us read our inboxes, prepare presentations, strategy narratives, finding problems, and just getting ahead of technology and getting summaries and taking that aid of that to make us work better. And kind of, as you started with talking about wearing several hats, I think that is the future for both developers and managers, that we become better at product strategy, understanding that, maybe UX, UI, and not taking the job from specialists, but understanding more. And we can do that by using generative AI tools and different LLMs and so on. So I'm very excited to follow that trend, to try it out and to challenge people and to kind of have hackathons to see what we can come up to. And I think a curiosity here and that feeling of learning a new technology because it's fun. I think if we can work with that and just exploring AI because it's fun will make us find those tools that we didn't know existed that would help us, not replace us, but make us work better and be more creative in what we do and having a more fun. But as I think I made the distinction between a isolated programmer, and becoming a creative developer who adds to the business impact, I think the same thing goes for managers. Like going from controlling managers and supervisors to leaders and creative leaders that enables people, make everyone see the direction of the company. And I think the AI can help us in doing that transition.
Yeah. And one last question that I really want to give you here as well is like the fact that you're working at the intersection of like strategy and people in your roles. What do you wish more organizations knew about or understood about the role of engineering in business outcomes?
I wish more people would talk to engineers and simplified their message and the narrative. And Stephen Bungay is an author and a strategist and has written many books and so on. I often cite him when he says something around, if you can't make it simple, you can't make it clear, and what's not made clear can't be done. So you need to make the complex business, and I'm sure that everything is complex, but you should also be able to explain it and simplify it and ballpark it. And as you probably noticed, I divide all my models that I have into 3.
Yeah.
And of course, I could divide them into 7 or into 10 or so. But 3 is like, it's 1, 2, 3. You can do that in an elevator pitch. You will remember it, and kind of having that kind of narrative for your business. So talk to engineers, find a simplified narrative, and trust that they are motivated to understand and motivated to be on your team if you bring them aboard.
Yeah. Really well put. Is there anything you'd like to add before I wrap up here?
Oh, no. I'm just happy that my passion for Nintendo games brought me into the tech world, because I think there's so much happening here, and tying it together and really working through a whole society just based on my passion for tech. And I want technology to be that society, kind of, we're here to solve society problems, and that more tech people see that they're not isolated. Kind of, we're here to understand, and we're closing in on that gap. It's not us and them, it's tech solving society challenges.
Yeah. No, I agree. And it's a really, really nice story about that kind of, inspiration and how you kind of got to where you are today. So I think more game consoles for the children, right?
Yes, for sure.
Fantastic. Well, Cecilia, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been really interesting to hear you talk about so much here, developing strong managers, navigating hybrid leadership, and a lot more. So I think really, well-grounded and actionable input here. So thanks so much for joining.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you for having me.
And to our listeners, if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who's building teams or navigating change themselves. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time, keep being curious, keep innovating, and keep building. We'll see you soon.